The car you're looking at in the background is a Detroit electric, and I believe it was built in 1915, and it represents one of the earliest models of an all-electric car that runs off of batteries. And they were popular particularly with women of the 1915 to 1920 era, when they didn't have to worry about gasoline engines. They were very easy to drive, and they were quite reliable. And of course, electric cars went out of usage in the period from 1920-25 on to present day, and now they're coming back again because petrol, diesel and fuel oil is getting expensive and harder to come by, and so electric cars are becoming more popular again and are being built in greater numbers today. In front of you here is a American car called an Auburn of the 1930s, and was quite a glamour vehicle in its day. As you can see, it's got a convertible body, a top that comes down, and would be very, very valuable car today, probably $50,000-$70,000 worth of automobile today. In the background now you can see a Packard, an American car of the first built in the teens of the last century, and built right up to after the Second World War. A very, very valuable car of that period that was bought by celebrities and people of means who had plenty of money. They were an expensive car in their day, and a very, very good car, very well built, very solid, very good to drive on long trips, and often owned by kings and you name it, people who had money. In front of us now is a very famous model car that was built by Henry Ford from 1928 to 1931, called the Model A Ford. And they were one of the most successful American cars that ever went on the road. They were reliable, they were simple, they were easy to drive, and they would go anywhere. And they were most popular in particular in farming areas, in the rural areas. They sold very well. There were about 4.5 million of them built, and you could buy one in the 1920s and 1930s for about $500.
Okay, what's your name, please?
Bob Wilson.
And where are you from?
Pimble here in Sydney.
And tell me about your car. Where did you get it from?
I bought it as 3 trailer loads of rusty rubbish at Borkham Hills.
Yes?
Yeah.
So you restored it yourself?
I restored it myself. Bought it in 2005. And the objective was to build it to drive around Australia in 2008 for the Centenary Rally. And
did you do that?
I did.
All the way up to Darwin, over to Perth?
Yeah, up to Cooktown, up to Normanton, down to Mount Isa, across to Three Ways, up to Darwin, round to Broome, down the west coast, right round.
Did the car break down on the way?
Of course it did, of course it did. It's a 1923 Model T Ford.
Was it easy to get it repaired?
Well, the both times it broke down in Queensland, and I needed 4 new exhaust valves. Now, they're not something you just go and buy off the shelf. You've got to make them, virtually. So I got into an engineering shop, and he turned them down, and we made the valves fit the car. I was in the workshop for the whole of one day. Got in there at 9 o'clock in the morning on a tow truck, and I drove out at 5:20 in the afternoon. I said to him, Brian, I've got to pay you some money. I said, how much? And he said, how's $100? I said, you're joking. He said, why, is that too much?
It's not easy to find spare parts for a vintage car.
No, it isn't, but one of the cars that was on the journey, he actually smashed a different engine in Queensland, and we got towed back to town, put in a lay-by, and in the paddock next door was a complete Model T diff that had been there for God knows how long, that had been overgrown with grass.
So you were lucky.
Yeah.
Why do you have such a passion for old cars?
It's one of those things I fell into. I was involved in motor racing in the 1970s, and after the children got off my hands and other things started to happen, I was looking at going back into motor racing, but historic racing, and one of my customers happened to have a Model T that was for sale, and I bought it on my 60th birthday, and that was my first car. This is my second.
How often do you drive it?
As often as I can.
And how often is that?
At least once a month, if not 3 times a month.
Okay. Do you know much about the history of this particular car?
The body on the back of it is a most unusual roadster body, and from what I can age it, it's around about 1919, peerless body, and peerless were coach builders in Queensland.
Is it a rare model?
The back is very rare. It's the only one of its kind that I've been able to find.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, except that the trip around Australia was a wonderful journey, and I'll do it again tomorrow.
That's a wonderful idea. Yeah, wonderful experience. Yeah. Congratulations.
Okay, thank you.
This is a most unusual car. It was originally came from Germany and was brought to Australia, I think, after the First World War, and restored here. It was on several farms before it was restored, and it was found in pieces, in effect, on a farm, and a lot of work, something like 20 years of work to put it back together again in the shape that you see it now. A very rare car, a very valuable car.
Anything special about it?
Oh, just that the Mercedes is an extremely good vehicle, and of its day, it was mechanically was one of the best. What you see here is one of the rarest cars in the world. They were called a Stanley steamer, and they were run by steam power. Usually the fuel would have been kerosene to heat up the boiler for the steam motor, and they ran entirely on steam power. And they are extremely rare today. There are very, very few of them around now. One of the problems is that there's a lot of work to make sure that the boilers are conformable, that they're going to stand the pressure of steam that you put in them. So they're quite an unusual car. And note the horn on the side, which is quite unusual. It's run by a bulb, and it's most unusual, but is a great addition to the car. This is a Citroën, a French Citroën car of the 1950s, and it's quite interesting in that it was used by the French police a lot. And many of the older movies, you see these dashing around with the police in them, and they were a very good car, very well engineered. They held the road well, and they were quite economical to run. But there are very, very few of them in Australia. This is one of the few that I've seen. In front of us here is a Ford of about 1933, 34. I'm not exactly sure of the year. They were most popular and were unusual in that they were one of the early Fords that came out with a V8 engine in them, after the Model A's and the Model B's, which preceded it. And they were extremely popular, and today they're more popular than ever, and they bring big money because they can be restored and made into something quite special. In front of us is a Packard of about 1925, 26, I'm not sure exactly what the age is, but they were extremely well built, very robust, strong cars that were popular with the more wealthy class of people. And they just didn't wear out. They'd go forever. I've heard of Packards that put 600, 700,000 miles on the motor, and they're still going strong. They're extremely good cars, and they were rather expensive. In the day, I would think this car would have sold for around maybe $4,000, and today it would bring probably around 60 to 70,000. Because it's popular with the restored car people.
Yes, I'm Pat Marshall-Cormack. I'm a member of the Riley Club of New South Wales. I'm not the owner of this beautiful machine. This is quite a rare car, really, because there was only approximately 100 of these machines made. It's a 2.5 litre. It's roughly the same chassis as the 2.5 litre sedan car. They originally had a column shift and a 3-seater, but most were converted to floor shift and 2-seat. This engine has a tremendous life. It started in 1929 in the first little Rileys, and then subsequently became larger capacity. And the largest one made was the 2.5 litre, which this is. Standard fitting was twin carburetors. And they were an excellent rally car, and followed the great history of pre-war Riley cars. Well, they produced, as I said, approximately 100 of these cars, and it came to Earl's Court on the same day as the XK120 Jaguar. And so you can imagine that there was very strong competition from that company, and an astonishing price. The Jaguar was cheaper than the Riley. These cars were specifically made for the American market, but weren't particularly successful, and a lot of them then went to South Africa and Australia. And the best ones are in this country. I think our New South Wales club has probably got about half a dozen of them.
In front of us now is a 1929 Plymouth Sedan, which was built by Chrysler, the Chrysler Corporation, in 1929, and it was just around the time when they were first introduced to the market, mainly to compete with Ford and Chevrolet in the low price field, and they were very successful. They're extremely good car, very well engineered, and extremely well received. In front of us now is a Mustang, which was built by the Ford company in the early 1960s and became an extremely popular sports model car for the younger set. They were quite economical to buy, quite cheap to buy, and fairly good on fuel. You could get them in a 6-cylinder or a V8. They're very popular today with restorers because they are an extremely sought after car, and a lot of younger people love to have a Mustang and restore one to its former glory. The next two cars are also Mustangs, slightly different style, two-door hardtop model, whereas the one you just saw in the medium green color was a convertible. Again, very popular model in Australia, around the world I should say. In front of us here is a Cadillac from, I think, 1959, and it represents one of the most gross models that Cadillac ever built, with huge tail fins, and just not really an attractive car. And yet today a lot of people love to get a hold of one because they're so outlandish that they're a cult car, if you like. They're in big demand for that respect, and yet they're not. I wouldn't call them an attractive vehicle by the remotest possibility.
Ask your name, please.
Yeah, Bob Doran.
And can you tell me a little about your car?
Yes, it was purchased new in 1959 in Newcastle. It then went to Singleton. It was owned by the owners of the local news agency, and it was in service right through until 1993. Then the person who owned it died, and it was stuck under a tree for a couple of years, and I found it and resurrected it, so I'm only the second owner.
So what sort of model is it?
It is a 59 Series 3.
It's Hillman?
Hillman Minx, yeah.
And when did you buy it?
I would have got it somewhere around about 98, and we restored it from there.
What's special about the Hillman as a car?
Reliability. It was reliable, wasn't a fantastic performer, but it always went.
In its day, was it fairly cheap and affordable?
It was one of the cars that, for most people, it was their first ever family car.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
That particular one is now the only one in New South Wales that's on full registration. There are a few others on club plates, as you'll see these historic plates. In Victoria there's still a few there, but that's about it.
So it's a fairly rare model?
Very.
Okay, I'm Ian, and this is my 1928 Sunbeam. It's quite a rare car. It's the only one of its body style in Australia. Two-door 1928 Model 16. Goes very well. It's been restored for quite a while, and we drive it on quite a lot of rallies.
Is there anything that's particularly special about this model?
Oh, just that they're a very good quality car. Sort of like a Jag these days, I guess.
How did you come by it?
Oh, I just found it through friends and talked to the owner and bought it.
So was it in pieces? Or
No, it was like this.
Okay, so you didn't have much restoring?
No, I had to get it going mechanically, but it wasn't too bad, so it's been running ever since.
How does it run now?
Beautifully. It sits on 60 miles an hour all day.
Were they particularly popular in their day?
Well, they were a very expensive car, so not really popular, but very sought after, I guess.
How expensive would they be?
Oh, about the same as buying a Jag now.
Well, in front of us now, and the last car in the list, is a 1948 Plymouth Coupe. And this belongs to me, and I bought it in Ohio in the USA about a year ago. It's a very original model, very rare here in Australia. There are very, very few Plymouth Coupes came to Australia. And this one is extremely low miles, about 44,000 miles on the clock. And it's in excellent original condition, runs well, nice to drive on the road, and I'm very happy with it.
Do you know much about the history of it?
It came from a farm home, the last owner. It's had two previous owners as far as I know. It came from a farm home near Columbus in Ohio, in southern Ohio. And prior to that, I think it came from up in the Cincinnati area in Ohio as well. It's spent virtually all of its life in Ohio until it came to Australia. I found it in one of the motor journals, Hemmings Motor News, which is well known around the world, and I bought it from that as a result of finding it in that.
Why do you have such a passion for old cars?
Oh, well, it's just part of our youth, isn't it? This car that you see in front of me was, I was about 20 years old when it first came out, and I loved cars, and it's just wonderful to get a hold of a car that was built and used at the time you were a young person. It takes you back in years to your younger days.
What interests you about cars specifically?
It's a good question. I just prefer them to modern cars. I know they don't drive as well on the road and that sort of thing, but they're lovely to own, and it's kind of nice to have something that's unique and different to everything else on the road, and nice to take them to rallies where people are interested in them, and we can talk to people as they come along and ask us questions about our cars, and it's just good fun.
How long have you owned the car?
About a year. I've only had it since 2011.
Is it a rare model?
Yes, in Australia this coupe is quite rare, but not in the US. There are many of them in the United States. They built about something like 150,000 of them originally.